Be honest, are you more familiar with the history of the galaxy far, far away than you are with our own universe? It's okay, I'm not here to judge. There has been a lot of exciting Star Wars stuff going on between The Mandalorian giving us the first live-action show in the franchise, and The Rise of Skywalker hitting theaters and irritating fans everywhere. This series has a long and complex history, but I'm going to do my best to break it down without leaving any of the good canon stuff out. Let's take a walk down memory lane and take a look at the complete Star Wars timeline, shall we? Before we get started on our deep dive into this fictional history, let's start with some basic info about our old friend, the Galactic Calendar. If this calendar system is good enough for characters in the Star Wars universe, then by Baby Yoda's sweet little green head, it's good enough for us. This system of record-keeping came into prominence during the New Republic era, but in our world, it was introduced into the canon in the 2015 Star Wars Card Trader card R2-D2 Jabba's Sail Barge. It described the year in which Han Solo was rescued from Jabba the Hutt as 3ABY, but fans of non-canon lore probably recognized it from the second edition of Star Wars the role-playing game. Anyway, all you really need to know about this fictional gatekeeping method is that events either take place in BBY or ABY. And no, those abbreviations don't stand for before Baby Yoda and after Baby Yoda. Although for the record, I think they should. But that's a topic for another video. As of right now, BBY stands for Before the Battle of Yavin, and ABY stands for After the Battle of Yavin. Another thing to keep in mind is that there is a lot of lore out there. I'm going to do my best to include major plot points and talk about relevant events and people, but sadly not everything will make the cut, sorry. So if your favorite Star Wars moment isn't in the video, just know that it's for the sake of brevity and not anything personal, I swear. Okay, now that we're all on the same page, let's take a look at the timeline, or more accurately, before the timeline was even a thing. Before the concept of galactic calendars existed, there was the Wellspring of Life, also known as the Force Planet. It was a nexus of power surrounded by a bright nebula. It was located in the heart of the galaxy itself and allowed microscopic organisms known as the midichlorian to come into being and disperse throughout the galaxy. Depending on how you feel about the prequels and the whole midichlorian thing, this could either be a beautiful moment or the moment your childhood obsession with Star Wars was ruined forever. An ethereal realm came into being known as Mortis, which became the subject of many legends amongst pretty much everybody from the highest-ranking Jedi to your average spacer. According to the stories, this place existed outside any known star system or possibly the universe itself. Mortis was like a dream. It couldn't be mapped and manifested itself into different ways depending on who was drawn to it. Only 3 intelligent beings lived there, and all were Force wielders caught in a desperate battle for dominance over the others. There's the son, who represented destruction, the daughter, who represented peace and creation, and the father, who maintained the balance of the Force between them. Mortis will come into play again later, but just know that it's been around a long time. At some point before 6000 BBY, the Jedi Order was founded on the planet Ahch-To by the very first members known as the Prime Jedi. They soon took possession of the planet Ilum, which contained the Kyber crystals that would later act as the power source for lightsabers. And needless to say, these specific weapons quickly became a core part of the Jedi Order. But of course, because we can't just have nice things, the Sith were soon formed by an outcast Jedi who wanted to see what this whole dark side of the Force thing was all about. The Old Republic was recognized around 1019 BBY, and this form of galactic government was supported by the Jedi Order. It spread throughout the galaxy, gaining influence and becoming increasingly powerful. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about my proposal for the Before Baby Yoda dating system, and I meant that, but I'm still going to kick off this timeline by announcing the birth of the OG Master Yoda himself. Although the Jedi were directly involved, the Sith preferred to keep their distance, at least for a time. While the Sith plotted evil deeds, the Jedi were out there trying to make the universe a better place. They went to war with the Zygerians, who had built their empire on the backs of slaves. It turns out slavery is one of the many things that the Jedi Order frowns upon, so this had to stop, and unsurprisingly, they went to war against the Zygerians. But not all the Jedi history is building temples and taking down slavers. They majorly bungled an assault on the Sith Temple of Malachor, which contained a Kyber crystal-powered superweapon. The Great Scourge of Malachor ended when everyone taking part was turned into stone by that said superweapon. And speaking of war, let's not forget about the Mandalorians. Also during this time, the Mandalorian Jedi War began. See, the Mandalorians are warriors, and they love to fight with pretty much anyone, and they ran out of other people to fight, so they had to start fighting amongst themselves. Meanwhile, the Old Republic began to fall to the persistent efforts of the Sith. It declined in power until the universe entered a time period known as the Dark Age, which was every bit as cheery as it sounds. While most of the Mandalorians fought with the Jedi, Tera Vizsla became the very first Mandalorian to be inducted into the Jedi Order. He also invented a super cool weapon called the Darksaber, which is like a lightsaber, but you get the picture. Now, the good news here is that the war between the Mandalorians and the Jedi ended in 3966 BBY. The bad news is that it all but destroyed Mandalore. It turned their once thriving planet into a desert wasteland. Now, instead of conquering other planets, it was all the Mandalorians could do to help their own people survive. During this time, the Jedi were also fighting the Sith and fought the Battle of Tokadana on the site where Maz Kanata's castle would later be built. The Jedi defeated the Sith, and those who survived went into hiding, making everyone believe that this conflict was over. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. But like, duh. Before we keep going with our Star Wars timeline, make sure to stay up to date with the latest from CBR by clicking on the subscribe button and turning on your notifications, either right from this page or from the settings menu if you're on mobile. Don't let that pesky YouTube algorithm keep you from your Star Wars fix. Now let's get back to the time where the Sith Lords were definitely defeated. In 1019 BBY, what was once the Old Republic was restructured into the Galactic Republic. This body of government was ruled by the Galactic Senate, which was made up of representatives from star systems and functioned as a democracy. Progress. According to the official Star Wars databank, Yoda lived until the ripe old age of 900, which means that he was born in 896 BBY. Don't worry, I'm not getting distracted wondering what Master Yoda looked like as a baby. Starting now. In 600 BBY, Jabba the Hutt was born, and in 200 BBY, Chewbacca graced the universe with his presence. Yeah, I know, he looks great for his age. Can we just meditate on the fact that Chewbacca was older than Qui-Gon Jinn, who was born in 92 BBY? I know that's a lot to take in, and I'll skip over the rest of the birth announcements until we get to one particularly interesting entry. In 41 BBY, Anakin Skywalker was born. Somehow. We know his mother was the slave Shmi Skywalker, but his father is more of a question mark. Qui-Gon Jinn believes his father was a cluster of midichlorians, so we'll just go with that for now. So let me hit you with your first pair of major Star Wars events that might just be too much of a convenient coincidence. 41 BBY is the same year Baby Yoda was born. Well, approximately, based on the fact that he's 50 years old when The Mandalorian begins, so just keep Baby Yoda in mind. I know I will. In 40 BBY, Galen Erso joined the Republic Futures program. That same year, Jedi Master Sifa Dyas used his powers of foresight to predict a galactic war. He wanted to raise a grand army, but he was dismissed as a warmonger and kicked off the Jedi High Council, a decision that definitely wouldn't come back to bite anyone. In 32 BBY, the Trade Federation blockaded Naboo, which caused something of a stir, to say the least. As a result of this, Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, Padme Amidala, Jar Jar Binks, and the Astromensch droid R2-D2 ended up meeting Anakin and his mother Shmi. So mark your calendars, because 32 BBY was the first time that R2-D2 and C-3PO met one another. Ah, memories. One small moment for the overall timeline, but one huge moment for fandom. Oh, and Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi discovered Anakin for the first time and managed to save him from a life of slavery into, well, let's just say a brighter future. I mean, lava is really bright, but let's not skip ahead here. Now, if you've seen the prequels, you're probably quite familiar with what happens next. Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi rescue Anakin from a life of servitude, Qui-Gon and Darth Maul manage to destroy each other, and Obi-Wan vows to teach Anakin the ways of the Force. In 24 BBY, there was a separatist crisis. Star systems were leaving the Republic in order to join the Confederacy of Independent Systems, which was headed up by Count Dooku, who formed the Separatist Senate. Attack of the Clones takes place in 22 BBY, 10 years after the Phantom Menace. Anakin starts to get close with Senator Palpatine, who is definitely not an evil Sith Lord, right? Obi-Wan starts to question his belief that Anakin is the chosen one for some reason, but everyone gets together for the showdown between the Republic's clone army and Count Dooku's separatists. Dooku escapes, Anakin and Padme marry on the DL, and things in the galaxy get pretty complicated. Now we get into the Clone Wars, which features Obi-Wan and Anakin dealing with Dooku and the separatists. This is where we meet Ahsoka Tano, who is a new Jedi apprentice under Anakin. This series bridges the gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. In 20 BBY, construction starts on the Death Star, and on Mandalore, a civil war breaks out. See what I mean about these guys always warring with someone? Ahsoka Tano was framed for an attack on the Jedi Temple, but even though her name was cleared, she walks away from the Order. Revenge of the Sith takes place in the Imperial era, where Anakin finally takes down Dooku in 19 BBY. This and his relationship with Palpatine, also known as Darth Sidious, turns him to the dark side. The Sith pulled the trigger on Order 66, which renders the Jedi Order all but extinct. Anakin narrowly escapes losing his life and becomes Darth Vader, while Padme gives birth to their children, perishing shortly afterwards. Obviously, their kids are Luke and Leia Skywalker, but hopefully you didn't need me to tell you that, right? Senator Bail Organa adopts Leia, while Luke goes with Anakin's stepbrother Owen Lars on Tatooine. Obi-Wan and Yoda go into exile on Tatooine and Dagobah, respectively. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order takes place following all of this and tells the story of former Padawan Cal Kestis, who is doing his best to restore the Jedi Order. Ultimately, he fails due to interference from Darth Vader, but he does succeed in keeping a device designed to locate Force-sensitive children out of his hands. In 13 BBY, Galen Erso is abducted and forced to work on the Death Star, and his daughter Jyn is taken by Saw Gerrera. A dashing rogue named Han Solo escapes Corellia, which is under Imperial control, and enrolls in the Imperial Navy. This is where we get Solo, a Star Wars story, which takes place in 10 BBY. Han meets his first friend Chewie, and after some adventures, they head to Tatooine looking for work. Star Wars Rebels kicks off in 5 BBY when Jedi Knight Kanan Jarrus leads a group of, well, rebels against the Empire. 2 years later, Leia Organa ascends to the throne of Alderaan. In 2 BBY, Obi-Wan takes out Darth Maul for good, and Sabine Wren trains with a Darksaber, really embracing the whole Rebels thing. There is a ton of history surrounding Sabine and Mandalore around this time, but remember what I said earlier about trying to get through massive amounts of material? If you're interested in taking a deeper dive into the topic, I heartily recommend some of our other videos which focus on the history of Mandalore, but let's keep going with the general Star Wars timeline. Now we finally get to 0 BBY, the Battle of Yavin. This major battle of the Galactic Civil War marked the destruction of the first Death Star and was the crowning moment of A New Hope. Luke Skywalker meets Obi-Wan, learns about the Force, and teams up with Leia, Han, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and R2-D2. Although they win the battle, they do lose Obi-Wan in a battle with Darth Vader, and construction on the Death Star 2 begins immediately. Honestly, you probably know the original trilogy inside and out, and if not, there's really no substitute for watching them. And the reason our heroes were able to figure out the weak spot in the Death Star was because of the events of Rogue One, a Star Wars story, during which Jyn Erso and her companions get the plans to rebel forces. The Empire Strikes Back takes place in 3 ABY when the Rebel Alliance is operating on the slightly chilly planet of Hoth. Darth Vader is out to crush them, and the rebels manage to narrowly avoid the scope of his power. Luke begins training with Master Yoda, but takes a break to go rescue Han and Leia, who've been handed over to the enemy. Luke saves Leia, but later is forced to deal with the realization that Vader is his father, which is just really awkward for everyone. During Return of the Jedi in 4 ABY, Luke and Leia rescue Han Solo from Jabba's stranglehold, Yoda fades away, and the rebels vow to take out the new Death Star. Luke refuses to join the dark side, and when Palpatine tortures him, Papa Vader steps in and saves his son at the cost of his own life. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang teams up with a bunch of adorable Ewoks to cripple Imperial forces operating on Endor. Oh, and the second Death Star was destroyed and everyone enjoyed a fun Ewok party on Endor. Seriously, even a bunch of old Jedi ghosts showed up to hang out. It was a banger. The Mandalorian picks up 5 years after Return of the Jedi in 9 ABY. The Mandalorian is a bounty hunter protecting sweet baby Yoda from the remnants of the Empire, but as much as I hate to say it, let's not get too into the side story right now. In 20 ABY, Leia resigned from the Galactic Senate due to the secret about her parents getting out. Instead, she forms the Resistance as General Leia Organa. Luke trained his nephew Ben Solo until he accidentally pushed him over to the dark side. Oopsie! The fledgling Jedi Order was gone, and Ben fled to the First Order under the leadership of Supreme Leader Snoke. Luke was feeling pretty down on himself, so he went ahead and isolated himself somewhere with plenty of porgs. Sometime between 5 and 21 ABY, the First Order was established, formed from the wreckage of the Galactic Empire. Star Wars Resistance begins in 34 ABY and tells the story of the First Order and Resistance members trying to stop it, including Poe Dameron. This also brings us to The Force Awakens, where Rey and defected Stormtrooper Finn team up with Han and Chewie to find Luke, who they hope can turn the tides of the battle against the First Order. Ben takes out his own father, but on a slightly positive note, Rey does end up finding Luke. By this time, though, the First Order has launched a full-on war to conquer the galaxy, and it's up to our heroes to stop it. But in The Last Jedi, she realizes that Luke's really over this whole teaching thing. She struggles to get him to help out while learning about her own powers. She and Kylo Ren team up to defeat Snoke, but ultimately they're on two opposite sides. Luke later shows up to save the Resistance, but at the cost of his own life. The Rise of Skywalker takes place a year later in 35 ABY, and... oh, come on, do you really want me to spoil this for you? Well, too bad, because I'm not going to. I took you back to the past as promised, but if you want to know what comes next, you're gonna have to head to the theater yourself. Which area of the Star Wars timeline do you think is the most interesting? Are you still a fan of the original trilogy, or is another period of time more your style? Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button for more videos from us here at CBR. Thanks for watching, we'll see you again next time.